Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to session 2, panel A, which is entitled Literature and Non-Human Animal Narratives. We only have 2 speakers in the end for today, so we are going to have about an hour session. Okay, so I would say that, as I said before, we are going to leave questions till the end, so that we can have a Q&A sessions where you can raise your hand. You have the button on Zoom. If you don't feel comfortable with your camera on, you can always write your questions or comments on the chat and I will read them aloud. I will please remind our 2 speakers to try to stick to time, so you have 15 minutes for your presentations, and I'm sure they're going to be fascinating talks for today. So as we do not have Genevieve with us today, we're going to go straight to our second, who's now a first speaker, Natalia Kopitko. I don't know if I pronounced that right. From
almost.
Yeah, almost that. Okay. From Minsk State Linguistic University. The title of her presentation is Animals and their Gothic Counterparts in J.C. Oates' novels Bellefleur. Okay, so Natalia, I don't know if you have a presentation to share with us. If you have any issues, just let me know.
Yes.
And the floor is yours, of course.
Thank you, Esther. I will try to download my presentation. It is like that. Just check. Well, it is quite short, but anyway, can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
I can see it
great.
now. Okay, yes. And if you you know how to put the full screen so that we can see full screen. Maybe if you just start the presentation, maybe, because like we can see the slide, the main slide, and then the other small. There you go, perfect. Yes, Natalia.
Yes, thanks.
Thanks.
Well, I'm glad because sometimes I cannot manage with these things properly, but this time it worked. Well, hello, good evening, actually. Well, I'm really happy to participate in the conference and, well, thank you to all of the organizers for arranging so perfectly, everything so perfectly well. Well, my heartiest greetings from Minsk, the Republic of Belarus, from the eastern part of Europe. And today I'm going to talk about the Gothic novel, which is Bellefleur by Joyce Carol Oates, and within the context of the conference, we were discussing animals and all types of animals in different contexts. I'm going to focus on animals and their Gothic counterparts in the novel by the distinguished American writer Joyce Carol Oates, who was born in 1938. And by this time, she has around 70 books. Well, she's really very prolific. And Gothic novels and tales and short stories being one of the genres she's really an expert in. Well, as for this book I'm going to talk about and the animals, which are the images of the characters of the animals who are used by Joyce Carol Oates. Well, they come from the novel, which is first in the cycle of, well, I think by this time these are 5 novels already, which have been written during different epochs, because this is the first novel, was published in 1980, and it starts her Gothic experimental cycle, where Joyce Carol Oates experiments with all kinds of Gothic modes, which were mainly popular in the United States in the 19th century. And what is more, she experiments not only with subgenres of Gothic fiction, such as family saga, as she does in this book. You can see the cover of the book on the slide. But also she experiments with mystery Gothic and Gothic horror and detective Gothic, so on and so forth. Well, as for this book, as the uh, title of the novel suggests, it focuses on the history of the family. And also suggested by the cover, these are different representatives of different generations of one the same family. And this is the family name, Bellefleur. If we have a look at it, it sounds French. And in French, as far as I know, it means beautiful flower. Probably there are suggestions or there are some allusions to the Mayflower, the ship on board of which the European settlers arrived at North America. The novel is a family saga, as I've said, and it's a Gothic family saga, so it suggests all kinds of family secrets and some terrifying, horrible and mysterious things which happen within the history of the family, which covers around 2 centuries, almost 2 centuries, starting from the late 18th onto the 20th century. And the plot of the novel is really intricate because there are different generations of the family who live in the large family mansion, which is called Bellefleur Mansion. But very often it is referred by the locals as the Bellefleur Castle. And this castle is, at the time of the narrative and narration in the 20th century, is quite deteriorating because it is large and it is difficult for the family to keep it on in a good shape and order, because it includes 64 rooms and so on and so forth. But going back to the animals and their role in the narration and the Gothic counterparts, the way they're used for the development of the plot, I would like to quote from Mark Twain, who once said that of all God's creatures, there are, he's talking about cats. And this is the first animal image I'm going to talk about, because this image is really one of the central animal images in the book. It is connected with all the transformations and mysterious changes which take place in the family and would contribute to its development and final collapse and disintegration, because at the end of the novel, the family castle is destroyed by one of the family members, though some of the family members are rescued. So Mark Twain here is talking about the cats, and he says that that one is the cat, I mean, that animal. And he suggests humorously that if man could be crossed with a cat, it would improve man, but it would deteriorate the cat. So we recognize that humorous manner of Mark Twain, but probably there is a grain of truth in this suggestion. And as the plot unfolds, actually the novel starts with the appearance of a cat. The fact is that the protagonists of the novel, the family couple, the married couple, Lee and her husband Gideon Bellefleur, who are at the center of our attention, they try to have another baby because this is Lee's dream. And somehow they cannot succeed in doing that. But then this cat appears on the porch of the family mansion one stormy night. And the cat brings a lot of changes to the family life. And also, it turns out that Lee is pregnant after some time. So the cat arrives as a small and pitiful kitten, dirty and wet from the rainy weather outside. But mysteriously enough, in the morning, the family finds it transformed into a large, beautiful, and luxurious cat lying imperiously on the mantelpiece. And this is one of the first transformations. Well, probably we can call it, or most definitely, Gothic counterparts, because if at the beginning, well, on that night, it's a dirty small kitten, as I've said, and then there is a luxurious cat. And if you have a look at this description, it's taken from the novel. The way it is represented with golden green eyes, which are flawless, like jewels, and there was something fascinating about them. And Lee's husband knew better. He knew that animals hadn't any grasp of their own being. They did not, after all, create themselves. And the Italians are by Joyce Carol Oates. Then its fur is described, silky fur, soft and rising cloudily. Thank you. Cloudily, and then revealing in a single rain of sunshine all sorts of amazing improbable colors. And then its fur is described vaguely tigerish, rainbow stripes of every variety of whites and depth of coloring. Well, the cat is really reminiscent, alludes to that large, luxurious Cheshire cat from Alice in Wonderland. And its name, well, this is the name Lee gives him, is Mahalalel. Well, she says that it reminds her of something she has read in the Bible. Actually, Mahalalel, it can be found in Old Testament. It means one who praises God. And probably, well, the function of Mahalalel here and its appearance is associated with the sign of God for Lee and the family, and all kinds of transformations which will take place in the family and on. So, as the plot unfolds, Mahalalel becomes not only a favorite house pet, but also Lee's talisman of good luck and the symbolic representation of her ambitious project attaining to the territorial expansion of her family state. So this is her great ambition and her plan to buy and to collect all the lands which used to be owned by the family and to restore the previous glory and fame the Bellefleur family had. Well, actually, after the appearance of the cat, as I've said, and her pregnancy and her birth of the child, she starts fulfilling her ambitions, and they are quite successful, though during this process she somehow starts ignoring her husband and other family members, neglecting rather, not ignoring, and her husband is quite irritated by that. So at the end of the novel, he brings the destruction to the castle, and many family members who find themselves in that place at that time. The cat actually is very, it's central for the plot development and for the first part of the novel, what is named, this is one of the editions of the book, what is named after the cat, it's called Mahalalel. And throughout the novel, Mahalalel gives a large progeny. There are a lot of kittens and they wander all around. Well, and it rather gives a lot of, much luck. And at the same time, there are lots of tokens and symbols associated with its appearance and its life in the castle. Mahalalel's generous posterity also suggests the generous posterity of the significance of the Bellefleur family. The same is true for other animal images Joyce Carol Oates uses quite successfully in her novel. And there is a dog, which is actually a werewolf, if we can apply this term to the dog, because it turns out that a poor boy from the Bellefleur neighborhood can supernaturally transform into this dog and can wander the vicinity to enjoy more freedom. So there are some social implications which are symbolically represented through this character, since he has definitely more freedom from social conventions and prejudice when he takes the form of the dog. So the way he's later harassed by the Bellefleur boys is also quite suggestive, because he tries to transcend the social boundaries, trying to assault. Well, he attacks one of the girls of the Bellefleur families, and he tries to rape her. But then he's harassed and finally murdered by the Bellefleur boys. So the Bellefleurs hunt him down for his actions, and they well, perform some sort of revenge on him for what he has done. There is also a large white bird of prey, which is called the noir vulture, and well, that carries off the illegitimate baby of Lee's husband, Gideon Bellefleur, and nobody can find the child any longer. But there are also some implications here connected with that creature, the bird, which is associated with death. And in other mythologies, I think it's in Egyptian mythology, that it is associated with the closeness to the realm of heaven, where where it presumably brings the child, but the child is illegitimate, and it's Gideon's child, a baby by a servant girl from the Bellefleur castle. So it also might be viewed as a Gothic counterpart of the bird, a vulture, that represents the form of revenge for what Gideon did. There are other animals, and among them there is quite a strange animal, which, whether it's an animal, it's rather an insect, a spider. And this spider has a name, Love, and it's Lee's pet. But ironically enough, this pet is killed by Gideon Bellefleur when he courts Lee, and this gives him rights, so to say, to become her bridegroom and then her spouse, her husband. Well, but it's rather, the situation is more humorous or ironic, because everybody was afraid of the spider, though Lee controlled the whole household, and she was was difficult to approach her, and but Gideon did that. So to conclude, just one more slide. I would like to say that Joyce Carol Oates uses animals and their Gothic counterparts in this large novel just to emphasize the idea, which is very common in Gothic narratives. I mean, the idea of the supernatural powers and the supernatural forces that can enter human life and can have power over humans, and also that Gothic idea of revenge that can also represent itself in the form of some supernatural phenomena or supernatural creatures, as in the form of animals who take their Gothic forms and perform all kinds of supernatural things which cannot be be fooled otherwise. Thank you for your attention, and I will gladly answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Natalia, for a fascinating talk. I'm sure there are going to be lots of questions and maybe comments at the end. Okay, so now let's go over to our next speaker. Let me take who's Ömer Aykaç from Yüzüncü University. I'm sorry for any mispronunciations. Ömer, are you there? There you are.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, the title of the paper is Dog Narrative, Reading Timbuktu in Terms of Existentialism. Great, so do you have a presentation to share?
Yeah, I have one.
Okay, perfect. So let's try if it works. All right.
Could you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see it. And
Okay.
perfect. And if you can put it in full screen, or there you go. Perfect. Great, Ömer.
Okay.
So the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am really happy for attending this symposium, and I am sending my greetings from Turkey, Eastern Anatolia, the city of Van. Today, I will talk about a special writer and a special book. I will talk about a crazy writer. In fact, I will try to read Timbuktu, the novel of Timbuktu of Paul Auster, in terms of existentialism. In fact, before starting, I want to say that he's a special writer for me because I studied about his novels during my master thesis process. So again, I am dealing with him and his a special novel of him. As Paul Auster woke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed into a dog, although this metamorphosis is different from the Gregor Samsa's lived in Franz Kafka's metamorphosis. You know, Auster's work is similar to Kafka's, Franz Kafka's investigation of a dog, both in Auster books Timbuktu and Kafka's investigation of a dog. The narrators are dogs. When you read Metamorphosis of Kafka and you witness Gregor Samsa's transformation and transformation into an insect or something like a cockroach and his suffering, you may fall also into a serious despair. However, Auster isn't hopeless, and metamorphosis is a constant feature of his own career. He began as a poet and switched to prose in 1982, and he began to write memoir long before it was fashionable, a brilliant, unorthodox meditation on father called The Invention of Solitude. Then came the New York trilogy, and after a brief flirtation with dystopia in the country of lost things, he shifted into the picaresque with Moon Palace and the music of chance. Next came big picture, politically engaged novel Leviathan, an American panorama, then a fable about a boy who could fly, Mr. Vertigo, and now another fable, Timbuktu, about a dog. In these works, we see many Paul Austers. In fact, you may see how. Let me explain it. Auster, a metafiction writer who is the master of fiction, doesn't allow his name to remain on the covers of his book. In each book, he turns into a hero, and his hero takes place in a mirror-like sequence of events, which is called mise en abîme in French. Anyway, sometimes he is one of the fictional heroes, and sometimes he is the real person with the name Paul Auster in fictional narrative. In fact, sometimes the real Paul Auster meets the imaginary Paul Auster on the same page. However, in this novella or novel, it doesn't matter how you call it, he decided to write from a canine perspective, which sounds offbeat and daring, but actually follows an established literary tradition. Now I want to come to the point and talk about the book. Timbuktu is a 1999 novel by Paul Auster. It's about the life of a dog, Mr. Bones, who is struggling to come to terms with the fact that his homeless master is dying. The story, set in the early 1990s, is told through the eyes of Mr. Bones, who, although not anthropomorphized as an internal monologue in English, the story centers on his last journey with his ailing master, Willie G. Christmas, to Baltimore. But the details of both of their early lives are told in flashbacks. The title by Christmas, a self-titled poet who believed it was a beautiful place called Timbuktu. A major running theme in the book is Mr. Bones' worry that the dogs will not go to Timbuktu, will not go to heaven, and he won't see Willie again, and that between the lines, the novella draws on the themes of existentialism and finding purpose in one's life and meditation on the late 19th century America. The first third of the novel recaps their past together and hints forward to Willie's death, after which Mr. Bones is on his way on the lookout for a new master. Mr. Bones first finds a young Chinese boy and later a suburban family, but in the end he resolves to rejoin Willie in Timbuktu, an oasis of the spirit, as Willie explained it, where the map of the world ends. That is where the map of Timbuktu begins. Now let's come to the existentialism part. Colin Wilson points out in the New Existentialism that existentialism is post-Christian philosophy. He explained that medieval men believed that life was meaningful because God had created man and Christ had redeemed it. This was the meaning of life, whereas 19th century man felt as if it had been thrown out of the Garden of Eden. He was in the world on his own. He might, with great difficulty, finds way back to some faith and affirmation. And we can say that the dog narrator, Mr. Bones, depicted throughout the book, symbolize an existential struggle, also despair. At the beginning of the book, they embark on quest with dear friend Willie, although it requires serious efforts, is also a hopeless journey. This is very clear fact. However, there is a search for hope also after this journey that ended with Willie's death. Mr. Bones struggles to build a life from his only friend and companion. He is hopeless at first, but then clings to life again in the hope of meeting Willie in Timbuktu. Each time he embarks on an adventure with a new hope, but nowhere he is as happy as with Willie, but he has to chase his hope in the world that resembles a wheel of samsara. It is even like a cycle, like Sisyphus. It is a story like rolling the big boulder forever on the top of the hill. Always a new home building cycle. This cycle comes to an end as soon as it finds the ideal family. The process that he started to live with his ideal family is actually the beginning of the end. Soon after some instability, he strikes lucky again and comes to family joins. They spoil him with all efforts. He's very happy there, and soon he finds out that he's even happier with family, with Willie. There is always enough food, rides in the family car, and ordinary life in the outskirts. But one day his fears come true. The family goes on a vacation, and He is put in dog hotel. He gets very sick, but he makes and plan flee, and he flees from the hotel back to the Jones's house. But in his condition, he doesn't find them. After waking up, every moment hurts, but he makes is to the nearby highway. Originally, he wanted to get help there, but in the end, he decides to go to the Willie, who assured him that they will be together in heaven. And he ends up running into oncoming traffic to commit suicide. When you read various books of Oster, in fact, you think that some novels have similar themes: aimless, lost wandering, characters with lack of purpose, the death of close companion or friend, or being trapped in almost inescapable situation, escaping from situation only committing suicide like Mr. Bones do. In my opinion, it's very extraordinary for dog to think about things like that or even suicide. But through the whole book, you get these impressions. The dog is much more human-like, we think, something that can understand even the most complicated things when you just talk to it. The dog has a blooming fantasy and lots of feelings, thoughts, and ideas. Altogether, I also think this book is very different because it is written from another point of view, from a point of view that is not human, but after some time you learn it's very humanly. It's full of unexpected turns and sometimes things you can't understand, but that makes it more real and authentic. Finally, I can say that the interaction between the dog and the poet is also remarkable. How they've influenced and respect each other, and how the dog develops his own philosophy on the base of Phyllis' thought, particularly the thoughts about the death and suicide amazed me a lot. Lastly, I came to the point that Timbuktu exhibits Paul Auster's mastery of wordplay and his skills at mixing existentialism with mundane themes, seen here in a showing small portion of American society from a dog's perspective. He keeps the reader guessing until the end whether Mr. Bones will find a happy fate or what a happy fate means in this case. Mr. Bones is actually a figure who questions and seeks meaning in his struggle for life, but that search, and with that, sadly, thank you very much for listening and attending.
Okay, thank you very much, Ömer. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you to both of our speakers. And now we have a few minutes because our speakers did perfectly on time. So we have a few minutes to see if there are any questions from the audience or any comments. Remember, you can use the raise your hand button here on Zoom. If you don't want to, you don't feel comfortable, or you cannot turn on your camera to speak, don't worry, you can always write on the chat and I will read them aloud. And let me check if there's anyone with the hands raised, or I'm going to open the chat to. Okay, I will wait a little bit. Well, let me congratulate you both again, both of the speakers. And well, Natalia, if I'm not mistaken, I remember I might start as well, just asking a few questions or start the discussion to see if someone else wants to jump in with us. I think I remember in your abstract, you talked about these animals being like catalyzers in the novel themselves, right? So they act
yes.
as catalyzers. So it's like, okay, so usually these animals appear before something happens, kind of like omens for the family. Because I haven't read the novel myself, but I found it very interesting to see how the author plays with these animals. So if you can comment anything on that, or you can delve into that.
Yeah, thank you for your question. That's a very seminal question, I think. Yes, and very, very interesting. That's true. Yes, that they are catalyzers, especially the cat. Catalyzes cat. There's a certain pun here, even. Why? Because the moment it appears on the porch, it is an omen. Though omen might be an omen for something good. And that's interesting also, now that I started speaking, well, you've asked, and I started speaking about that. As at the beginning, it is definitely viewed as a good omen, because all kind of good things, the moment it appears, they start happening in the family. So the family, there is a birth of the child. There is something again curious about this child, because it is born, the child is born, and it's difficult to understand whether it's he or her. It's actually hermaphrodite. And then the gender of the child, the sex of the child is decided, and it's her. And then also the ambitious plans of Bellefleur, the female part of the family, the female leader of the family, you can say so, they can start coming true, because she starts collecting money and spending money on buying the property which used to belong to the family, and the estate becomes larger, and she's quite also she fulfills herself as a woman, as a leader, and she is quite powerful by the end of the novel. But then at the end of the novel, the cat disappears, and many of its descendants, so to say, its kittens and other cats, Morillo was father to. And it's also an omen that something bad, something negative is going to happen to the family. It is a certain trigger, and it pushes forward the plot and makes us understand the events better. The same is true. Well, I think it was the cat is the central catalyzer in the novel, and taking into account the fact that Joyce Carol Oates is a cat lover. Well, she has a lot of cats around her, and they come and go, and there are some cats who come from the woods, and she feeds them and so on and so forth. Well, she's really very enthusiastic about that character image, animal character, and it is a central one in terms of the plot development. It's true also for other animal characters, but I think the cat Morillo is the central one.
Okay, thank you. I was actually going to ask you about what happens to the cat at the end, but you told us, so I was kind of curious to know.
It wanders away.
Who knows what happens
with its kittens? Yes.
Okay, and that's again like catalyzer, well, to see that bad things are going to happen.
That's true. Yes, because they say that cats feel that they're very intuitive, and it's also an omen that everybody should get rescued if they would like to survive the collapse of the house.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any more questions from the audience, or any comments, or maybe, I don't know, the speakers, you want to ask each other any questions, or did you have any comments?
Can I ask?
Yeah, of course.
About the dog. So it's a dog narrative, and you've told us that the dog is a narrator in terms of, is the dog personified, and there is a parallel that came to my mind with the Russian writer Bulgakov and his novel The Heart of the Dog, where the dog is also, a narrator at the beginning, and then the dog he's operated, or the dog is operated on, it becomes a human being. What happens to it? Well, can we draw any parallels?
Could you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Could you please repeat your comment? I missed some parts of it.
Well, I mean that when we talk about dog narratives, the dog, whether in the novel by Paul Auster, the dog is personified, is treated as a human being, and how is it reflected in the manner of writing? This is the first comment. And the first question, and the second question deals with the parallel I drew with the Russian writer, or Soviet Russian writer, whose name is Bulgakov, Mikhail Bulgakov, and his novel The Heart of the Dog, or Dog's Heart. Do you know this book?
In fact, I don't know that book, but as I read, there is similarities between the Timbuktu and, as I said in my presentation, Franz Kafka's book, and I found out that also Virginia Woolf has a book that can be compared with that book. Let's go to the first question. I think there is no personification from the very beginning of the book. The dog is the narrator. No one talks, only he thinks, and the dog makes comments both about humans and also the meaning of life. Sometimes, as I said, he thinks like human beings. Sometimes the dog feels fatigue, exhaustion about life, and as you see at the end of the book, the dog commits suicide. We see that all the things, all the behaviors, all the point of view belongs to human beings, but all the things are narrated by the animal itself. I don't know whether it is enough for you or not.
Yes. But again, we are talking about non-human animals, but here animal is still humanized, because in a way he's imbued, he's ascribed some characteristics of a human being. Since why I'm asking you this question, because in the quotation I gave from the book Bellefleur, when the character is looking at the cat, he mentions that the cat, or any cat, does not have a grasp of its own being, like it's not conscious of its being, or probably it's another type of consciousness, but we do not know. But anyway, we ascribe our human characteristics and apply them to the animal, even if we write from the perspective of the animal, right? Though it's really very interesting, because another technique which is called estrangement, this is the way estrangement works, because actually we are taken from our usual surrounding, our perception of things, and we start looking at the world from the point of view of a dog. Thank you for your presentation, very interesting.
You're
and
welcome.
Those parallels
Thank you.
But I do recommend, it's Mikhail Bulgakov. I do recommend the book. I'm not sure how it's translated into English, because the idea came to my mind that I haven't read the English variant, but it's either the dog's
Heart.
or the heart, yes, or the heart of a dog. And there is, well, a social parody there associated with the Soviet regime and the revolution, socialist revolution in Russia and so on and so forth. But it's also interesting because at the beginning, all the events and that reality which is established in Russia after the socialist revolution is represented through the eyes of the dog. And the dog even reads, you know, there was a common feature for the beginning of Soviet days in Russia that there were a lot of acronyms, you know, abbreviations.
Yeah.
And the dog read that abbreviation, the name of the shop, backwards. And that's also, I mean, funny and interesting. Thank you.
Now I searched for it, and you remember clearly. I think its name is Heart of a Dog.
Yes.
Yeah. And we have a similar book. I think maybe it will be interesting. Also in Turkey, there is a writer named İdris Baluken. He has a book named Oko. In fact, he has a political side, and the book maybe is a politic book. Timbuktu and the Heart of Dog. It is also by a dog. Maybe it can be a different thing to analyze the two writers together.
Yes, yes. And are there any social implications in Paul Auster's books?
Yeah.
Any social and political, yes.
Yeah.
And also there is an interesting perspective, that existentialist perspective you've chosen. And if I allowed to ask one more question.
Yeah, of course, Natalia, go ahead.
Thank you. Hoping I'm not, I think that, well, as if we think about existentialism, there is this idea of, you know, solitude or loneliness and isolation from the rest of the world and all kinds of things associated with sickness and apocalypse and so on and so forth. Well, are there any artistic images, metaphors, or symbols which represent these existentialist ideas? And one more existentialist idea that came to my mind, which is associated with choice, and that choice which is finally an illusion of choice, but not per se.
Yeah. In fact, the dog makes choices. He focuses on the choices. Sometimes the dog searches for freedom, and there is a search of existence like human beings. As I said, sometimes he feels like Sisyphus, but at the end of every event or every trying, he again try to focus on his own dreams. Sometimes the dog wants to go to the Timbuktu, the heaven, but he never go to the end till the last search for happiness with the last family he lived with. At the end of the book, the dog makes his last choice. Although he is happy with that family, or he knows that the dog knows that he's happier than living with Willie, the old friend of him. He chooses the death. He commits suicide. I think also this is a clear example of making choice, focusing on the choices, and the dog make his choice. From that, he goes to Timbuktu.
Thank you. Well, that's really interesting, because again, that choice of the dog, the final one is suicide.
Yeah.
This might be an illusion of that freedom or free choice that actually is an escape into death. Thank you.
Right. You're welcome.
Okay, we got a great discussion there going. Because by the way, Ömer, you said that this book by Oates was published like by the end of the 20th century, right? It's 1990.
1990s, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So again, this existentialism, well, I mean, when there's a change of century, when the end of the century of an era is coming, so there's always kind of this, again, this need, this fear, kind of, right? So we start again asking ourselves these kind of existential questions, and so very in line with the times, I guess. And I was actually going to ask Ömer, as Natalia did, but she did already. So I was actually going to ask you about, because we know from the very beginning of the book, when we start reading the novel, we know that it is told from the dog's perspective, right?
Yeah.
And we can see that, I don't know, can we see that too in, I don't know, maybe in the vocabulary or the grammar or the structure, the language the dog uses? Can we see that? Like, would you say, I don't know, because I haven't read the book, but would you say that there's a difference there that we can see is written from another perspective?
In fact, in the book, the dog uses the language, the narrative technique of Paul Auster himself. During the book, maybe in all parts, we see that Paul Auster says, "I am here," because, as I say, I studied him during my master thesis degree. He tries to be, in his book, he tries to give details about his own life. For example, I don't think that there is a book that Paul Auster doesn't talk about Chicago, and sometimes he makes references to important literary writers like Edgar Allan Poe. And during the book, we see that there is a reference to Edgar Allan Poe, and sometimes he talks about Chinese restaurants, and also talks about Chinese restaurants and meals. And also we know that Paul Auster make some comments and generally talks about American life, American modern family, sometimes makes strict sentences about the American family. The dog also remind us that comments, that criticism of Paul Auster's about American way of life, American family life. So we know that the dog is the narrator, but we know that Paul Auster is the one that makes him speak.
Yeah, he's always there behind every, so he's omnipresent in all of his novels. Great, thank you. Okay, maybe a couple of minutes left, more or less. Are there any more questions, comments? This is the last chance for you, the audience, if anyone has anything they would like to share with us, with our speakers.
Again, that's interesting that a dog is chosen for the perspective of an existentialist narrative, not a cat, say, or a rat. It's probably more about a dog to be that oriented.
That's true. Do we know anything about, I don't know, Ömer, if you have found anything, if you found anything about that, but do you know, or do we know, has Paul Auster shared with the world why he chose a dog for this one, for this novel, to talk about, talk from the dog's perspective this time?
I think dogs are important for Paul Auster. This is something related with his sympathy for dogs, I think, because in many of his books, I saw the image of a dog. His choice is mainly our dogs itself.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thanks. Okay, so I guess if there aren't any more questions or comments from anyone from our audience, I think we can actually close this up. Again, thank you all for your presentations. Thank you very much for our audience for being here today with us too. And just remember, if you would like to keep the conversation going, if there's anything you would like to share, references, bibliography, whatever, okay, you can, now that in a few minutes we have some free time before the next session begins, you can always go to Lounge A, because we are in panel A, so you can go there to keep the conversation going if you want to. Okay, otherwise the next session starts, let me just check just in case. Yes, well, we have more time because we only had 2 panelists today, so until 6, that is European Central Time. So but you can see the timetable, you can always check the time. So until 6 we have some free time. You can please go on to Lounge A. Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, Ömer. Thank you everyone for being here today.